The wooden planks trembled beneath Madeline Everhart's feet as the old suspension bridge over Serpent Creek groaned in protest against the blustery autumn wind. The year was 1876, and the once thriving mining town of Silver Ridge, Colorado, had seen better days, much like the bridge she now cautiously traversed. Her heart hammered in her chest as she clutched her carpetbag tighter, the childhood fear of heights never quite abandoned even at 22 years of age. "Just a few more steps," she whispered to herself, the words carried away by the wind. The rushing water below seemed hungrier than usual after 3 days of relentless rain. She paused midway, the bridge swaying ominously, when a terrible crack shattered the air. Time slowed as the wooden slats beneath her feet suddenly gave way. Madeline screamed, her carpetbag tumbling into the churning waters below as she desperately clutched at fraying ropes. The bridge was collapsing, section by section, and she was going down with it. "Hold on." A deep voice commanded from the bank she'd been heading toward. Through terror-blurred vision, she saw him tall and broad-shouldered, moving with impossible speed toward the disintegrating bridge. A cowboy, his hat flying off as he raced against catastrophe. Another support rope snapped with a whip-like crack. Madeline's fingers slipped, her body dangling precariously over the roiling creek. Then he was there, balancing on what remained of the bridge's framework, reaching for her with strong, steady hands. "Bridge won't hold us both for long," he called out over the rumble of breaking wood. "Hold on to me, I'll carry you." Their eyes met his, a startling shade of blue against sun-bronzed skin, and in that heartbeat of connection, Madeline made her choice. She released the rope with one hand and reached for him. His grip was iron as he pulled her toward him, wrapping a secure arm around her waist. Without hesitation, he hoisted her against his chest. "Wrap your arms around my neck and don't let go," he instructed, his voice steady despite the death trap they stood upon. Madeline did as told, burying her face against his shoulder as he calculated their escape. With one powerful leap, he launched them toward the bank, the bridge completely giving way beneath them as they soared through the air. They landed hard on solid ground, the cowboy twisting to take the brunt of the impact. They rolled together, a tangle of limbs and gasping breaths, coming to rest with Madeline sprawled atop his chest, her honey blonde hair fallen from its pins and cascading around them both like a curtain. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked, his breath warm against her cheek. Madeline pushed herself up slightly, suddenly aware of their intimate position. "No, you saved my life." A smile curved his lips, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Wyatt O'Connor, at your service, madam." "Madeline Everhart," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt as the remains of the bridge disappeared beneath the churning waters. "I believe I owe you more than just my name, Mr. O'Connor. Let's start with getting you somewhere safe," he said, helping her to her feet. "And please call me Wyatt." She nodded, brushing dirt from her skirts, acutely aware that her entire life had just changed course, and that the carpetbag containing everything she owned in this world was now somewhere downstream. "Everything I have is gone," she whispered, staring at the raging creek. Wyatt followed her gaze. "Not everything, Miss Everhart. You still have your life, and in my experience, that's always enough to start again." As they walked away from the ruined bridge, neither could have known how prophetic those words would prove to be. The town of Silver Ridge greeted them with weathered storefronts and muddy streets. Madeline limped slightly beside Wyatt, her ankle tender from their rough landing. The cowboy had insisted on retrieving his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding named Copper, before escorting her to town. "The Silvertip Hotel should have a room available," Wyatt said, guiding her down the main street. "Mrs. Peterson, who runs it, is a kind woman. She'll help you get settled until you figure out your next move." Madeline bit her lip. Without her belongings, including the small pouch of coins that represented her entire savings, she had nothing to pay for accommodations. "I'm afraid I can't afford a hotel room," she admitted quietly. "My money was in my bag." Wyatt studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "If you don't mind my asking, what brings you to Silver Ridge? You don't strike me as someone who was planning to stay." I wasn't. I'm heading to Denver. My uncle has arranged a position for me as a schoolteacher there. She straightened her shoulders. I was traveling by stagecoach, but it broke an axle about 10 miles back. The driver said Silver Ridge was the closest town, so I walked. You walked 10 miles alone. Wyatt looked impressed. I had little choice. The driver and the other passengers continued with the luggage wagon, but I was eager to reach Denver before my position was given to someone else. Wyatt nodded thoughtfully. Denver's still a good 3 days' ride from here. I know, Madeline sighed, the full weight of her situation sinking in. Without money or identification papers, I don't know how I'll get there now. They paused outside the hotel, a 2-story clapboard building with peeling white paint. Wyatt seemed to be considering something as he tied copper to the hitching post. I'll speak with Mrs. Peterson, he finally said. And I'm heading to Denver myself in 2 days. You're welcome to ride along if you'd like. Madeline's eyes widened. You're going to Denver. I am now, he replied with that dimpled smile that made her pulse quicken inexplicably. I've got business to attend to there eventually. Might as well be sooner rather than later. Before she could protest, he was guiding her through the hotel's front door, his hand a gentle pressure at the small of her back. Mrs. Peterson turned out to be a round-faced woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. After hearing their tale, she clucked sympathetically. You poor dear. Nearly drowned and lost everything? Well, we can't have you sleeping on the streets. I've got a small room at the back, not our finest, mind you, but clean and comfortable. I can't pay you, Madeline began, but Mrs. Peterson waved her concerns away. Any friend of Wyatt O'Connor is welcome here. That man saved my Walter when our mine collapsed 2 years ago, pulled him out when everyone else had given up. She patted Madeline's hand. You can help me with the washing and cooking while you're here. That'll be payment enough. Madeline glanced at Wyatt with new appreciation. He was examining his hat, seemingly embarrassed by Mrs. Peterson's praise. Thank you, Madeline said sincerely. I'm not afraid of hard work. Good, because there's plenty of it, Mrs. Peterson laughed. Now let's find you some clean clothes. We can't have you walking around in those muddy things. As Mrs. Peterson led her upstairs, Madeline glanced back at Wyatt. He stood watching them, his expression thoughtful. Thank you, she mouthed. He touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement, that smile reappearing briefly before he turned to leave. That night, dressed in a borrowed nightgown and wrapped in clean sheets, Madeline stared at the ceiling of her small room. The day's events played through her mind the terrifying moment when the bridge gave way, the strong arms that had saved her, the kind blue eyes of a stranger who had changed the course of her life in an instant. She wondered what kind of man Wyatt O'Connor truly was, and why the thought of spending 3 days traveling to Denver with him filled her with both trepidation and an unexpected flutter of anticipation. Morning came too quickly. Mrs. Peterson put Madeline to work immediately after breakfast, showing her how to change linens, scrub floors, and help in the small kitchen that served simple meals to the hotel's guests. The work was hard but honest, and Madeline threw herself into it, grateful for the distraction from her worries. It was mid-afternoon when Wyatt returned, his tall frame filling the doorway of the kitchen where Madeline was kneading bread dough. Miss Everhart, he greeted her, hat in hand. I hoped I might find you here. Madeline brushed a strand of hair from her face with the back of her wrist, leaving a small smudge of flour on her cheek. Mr. O'Connor, I didn't expect to see you again so soon. I've been down to the creek, he said, stepping into the kitchen. Without thinking, he reached out and gently brushed the flour from her cheek. The casual touch sent a jolt through Madeline, and she stepped back slightly, flustered. I'm sorry, he said immediately, misreading her reaction. I shouldn't have. No, it's fine, she assured him. Did you find anything? At the creek, I mean. He nodded, producing a small, sodden leather-bound book from his pocket. Your carpet bag is long gone, I'm afraid, but I found this caught in some branches downstream. I thought it might be yours. Madeline gasped, taking the waterlogged journal with trembling hands. My diary, she whispered. I've kept it since I was 16. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. This means more to me than you could know. Wyatt, he reminded her gently, and I'm glad I could return something of value to you. She held the diary carefully, aware that many of the pages would be ruined, but grateful to have recovered even this small piece of her past. I also spoke with the telegraph operator, Wyatt continued. He's sending a message to your uncle in Denver, explaining what happened and that you'll be arriving in a few days' time. Madeline looked up in surprise. You did that for me? Seemed the right thing to do, he said with a shrug. Wouldn't want him thinking you'd changed your mind about the teaching position. That was very thoughtful, she said, genuinely touched by his consideration. But how did you know my uncle's name? A faint blush colored Wyatt's tanned cheeks. Mrs. Peterson mentioned you talked in your sleep last night. She heard you calling for your Uncle Thomas. It was Madeline's turn to blush. Oh, I see. An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Mrs. Peterson bustled into the kitchen. Wyatt O'Connor, I thought I heard your voice. Will you be staying for supper? We're having beef stew, and Madeline here makes the most delicious biscuits I've tasted in years. I'd be honored, Mrs. Peterson, Wyatt replied, his eyes never leaving Madeline's face, if Miss Everhart doesn't object to my company. Not at all, Madeline said softly, surprising herself with how much she meant it. That evening, seated at Mrs. Peterson's table with 3 other hotel guests, a traveling salesman, an elderly prospector, and a young widow heading east to live with her sister Madeline, found herself studying Wyatt O'Connor. He spoke little but listened intently, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. He answered questions about his ranch outside of town with modest pride and treated Mrs. Peterson with genuine respect. When the salesman made a slightly off-color joke, Wyatt's expression cooled noticeably, and the man quickly changed the subject under that steady blue gaze. Madeline found herself wondering what it would be like to have someone like Wyatt O'Connor looking out for her interests. After dinner, Wyatt offered to show Madeline the town, such as it was. With Mrs. Peterson's blessing and knowing wink, they strolled down the main street as dusk settled over the mountains. Silver Ridge has seen better days, Wyatt explained as they passed boarded-up storefronts. When the main silver vein played out 5 years ago, most folks moved on. Why did you stay? Madeline asked, curious about this man who seemed so rooted to a dying town. My father homesteaded our ranch before the silver strike. The land's good for raising cattle, regardless of what's beneath it. He paused, looking toward the distant mountains now bathed in purple twilight. It's home. Something in his voice made Madeline ache with a longing she couldn't quite name. She'd had no real home since her parents died of influenza when she was 18. The aunt who had taken her in had made it clear that Madeline was a burden, not a beloved niece. Only her mother's brother, Uncle Thomas, had shown genuine concern for her welfare by arranging the teaching position in Denver. You're fortunate to have a place that feels like home, she said softly. Wyatt glanced at her, something flickering in his expression. Everyone deserves a home, Miss Everhart. They stopped outside the town's single saloon, the Golden Nugget, its windows glowing with lamplight. Piano music and raucous laughter spilled into the street. Not the sort of establishment a lady like yourself should enter, Wyatt said apologetically. Though I admit it's one of the few businesses still thriving here. As if on cue, the saloon doors burst open and a man stumbled out, clearly intoxicated. He spotted them and lurched in their direction. Well, look who it is, Wyatt O'Connor, and a pretty new face. The man's words slurred together as he approached. Don't tell me you've finally found yourself a woman, O'Connor. Madeline felt Wyatt tense beside her. Evening, Dawson. You've had enough for one night, I think, Dawson sneered, swaying slightly. Always so high and mighty. Just 'cause you own the biggest spread around doesn't make you better than the rest of us. His bloodshot eyes fixed on Madeline. What's a pretty thing like you doing with this solemn cowboy? I could show you a much better time. Before Wyatt could respond, Madeline stepped forward. Sir, you are drunk and making a spectacle of yourself. I suggest you find your way home before you say something you'll regret when sober. Dawson blinked, momentarily stunned by her forthright response. Then he threw back his head and laughed. She's got spirit, O'Connor. Better hold tight to this one. With that, he stumbled off down the street, still chuckling to himself. Wyatt turned to Madeline with newfound respect in his eyes. You handled that well. Most ladies would have hidden behind their escort. Madeline smoothed her borrowed skirt. I taught at a small school in Pennsylvania for 2 years, Mr. O'Connor. Dealing with drunks isn't so different from managing unruly schoolboys. They respond best to direct, confident instructions. A genuine laugh escaped Wyatt, the sound rich and warm in the evening air. I believe Denver is gaining an exceptional teacher, Miss Everhart. They continued their walk, the conversation flowing more easily between them. Madeline learned that Wyatt had come west with his parents as a boy, that he had 2 younger sisters who had both married and moved to California, and that he ran his cattle ranch with the help of 5 loyal cowboys who had been with him for years. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, her parents' untimely deaths, and her determination to make her own way in the world rather than become a permanent burden to relatives who saw her as an obligation rather than family. Teaching suits me, she explained as they circled back toward the hotel. I love watching children discover the world through books and learning. There's nothing quite like seeing a child's face light up when they finally understand something that had puzzled them. You speak of it with passion, Wyatt observed. That's rare and valuable to truly love one's work. And do you love ranching? She asked. Wyatt considered this as they paused outside the hotel. I love the freedom of it, the responsibility. Knowing that my decisions and hard work directly affect the outcome. He smiled slightly. And I admit I prefer the company of cattle and horses to most people. Yet here you are, escorting a stranded schoolteacher around town, Madeline teased gently. Some exceptions are worth making, Miss Everhart. His voice had softened, and in the lamplight spilling from the hotel windows, his eyes seemed to hold a question for a moment. Madeline thought he might reach for her hand, and she was surprised by how much she hoped he would. Instead, he stepped back slightly, touching the brim of his hat. We'll leave for Denver the day after tomorrow if that suits you. I have some business to finish here first. That would be perfect, she replied, ignoring the tiny flicker of disappointment. Thank you again, Mr. O'Connor. Wyatt, he reminded her once more, a hint of that dimple appearing. Sweet dreams, Madeline. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice followed her into her dreams that night. The next day passed in a flurry of activity. Mrs. Peterson kept Madeline busy with hotel work, but also took her to the general store where, using Wyatt's credit, they selected a few necessities for the journey: a sturdy pair of riding boots, a warm jacket, and practical clothing more suited to horseback travel than her borrowed dresses. Wyatt insisted, Mrs. Peterson said when Madeline protested, said to put it all on his account and he'd settle up before you both leave. But I've only just met him, Madeline argued, uncomfortable with accepting such charity. I can't let him spend his money on me this way. Mrs. Peterson studied her with knowing eyes. That man has more money than he lets on, dear. The O'Connor Ranch is the most successful operation in 3 counties, and I've known Wyatt since he was knee-high to a grasshopper he wouldn't offer if he didn't want to help. Madeline reluctantly accepted the gifts, promising herself she would find a way to repay him once she was established in Denver. When she returned to the hotel, she found a package waiting for her: a leather-bound journal, similar to her ruined diary but with pristine blank pages. A note in a strong, masculine hand read simply, "For new beginnings, W." The thoughtfulness of the gesture brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She had known Wyatt O'Connor for barely 24 hours, yet he seemed to understand what would mean most to her. That evening, Mrs. Peterson insisted Madeline join her for tea in her private sitting room after the kitchen was closed. Now tell me honestly, the older woman said as she poured steaming tea into delicate cups that seemed out of place in the Frontier Hotel, what do you think of our Wyatt? Madeline nearly choked on her first sip. I hardly know him, Mrs. Peterson. Nonsense. Sometimes a person reveals more of their true character in a crisis than others show in years of acquaintance. Mrs. Peterson stirred sugar into her tea. The way he risked his life to save you at that bridge tells me everything important about that man. He is certainly brave and kind, Madeline admitted, and handsome as sin, Mrs. Peterson added with a mischievous smile. Don't tell me you haven't noticed those blue eyes. Madeline felt heat rising in her cheeks. Mrs. Peterson, I'm going to Denver to be a schoolteacher. My future is there, not here with a man I've just met. Denver isn't so very far, the older woman said thoughtfully. And plans can change. Mine can't, Madeline said firmly. I've worked too hard for this opportunity. Mrs. Peterson patted her hand. Of course, dear. I'm just an old woman who enjoys a good love story. And speaking of stories, Wyatt hasn't escorted a woman anywhere in the 3 years since Sarah Williams jilted him for that banker from Denver. Despite herself, Madeline's curiosity was piqued. He was engaged, as good as. Everyone expected an announcement any day when Sarah suddenly left town. Broke his heart, I think, though he never speaks of it. Mrs. Peterson sighed. That's why it surprised me to see him taking such an interest in you. It's the first time since Sarah that he's shown any inclination toward female company. Madeline absorbed this information, unsure how she felt about it. He's simply being kind to a woman in distress, Mrs. Peterson. I wouldn't read more into it than that. If you say so, dear, Mrs. Peterson replied with a knowing smile that suggested she believed otherwise. Now, you'd better get some rest. You have a long journey ahead tomorrow. That night, Madeline wrote in her new journal, trying to sort through her conflicted feelings. She was grateful to Wyatt, certainly, impressed by his character and kindness. And yes, she could admit in the privacy of her thoughts that she found him handsome and compelling in a way no man had affected her before, but she was practical above all else. School teachers were expected to be above reproach, models of propriety and decorum. Falling for a cowboy she'd just met was not part of her carefully constructed plan for independence and security. By the time she closed the journal and extinguished her lamp, Madeline had convinced herself that her racing pulse, whenever Wyatt was near, was nothing more than the lingering effect of her near-death experience. 3 days of travel to Denver would prove it one way or another. Dawn broke clear and cold over Silver Ridge. Madeline dressed in her new practical attire, a divided riding skirt, sturdy blouse, and the warm jacket from the general store. She braided her long blonde hair and pinned it up securely beneath a wide-brimmed hat that Mrs. Peterson insisted would protect her fair complexion from the harsh mountain sun. Wyatt was waiting outside with 2 horses, his chestnut gelding Copper, and a dappled gray mare he introduced as Willow. She's steady and gentle, he explained as he helped Madeline mount. Perfect for someone who hasn't ridden much. How did you know I'm not an experienced rider? Madeline asked, adjusting her skirts over the side saddle. Wyatt's mouth quirked in that half-smile she was coming to anticipate. The way you approached her, confident but cautious, am I wrong? No, she admitted. I've ridden before, but not extensively. We had few opportunities in Philadelphia. You'll do fine, he assured her, securing her small bundle of new possessions behind the saddle. Willow will take good care of you. Mrs. Peterson emerged from the hotel with a package wrapped in oilcloth. Provisions for the journey, she explained, handing it to Wyatt. Biscuits, jerky, and some of my apple tarts. Can't have you two going hungry on the trail. She embraced Madeline warmly. You come back and visit us someday, you hear? Silver Ridge could use a good teacher if Denver doesn't work out. Thank you for everything, Madeline said sincerely, fighting unexpected emotion. In just 2 days, the town and Mrs. Peterson had begun to feel like home in a way few places ever had. With final goodbyes exchanged, they set off, riding east along a trail that would eventually connect with the main road to Denver. The morning air was crisp, the aspens beginning to turn golden against the evergreen backdrop of pines. Madeline found herself relaxing into the gentle rhythm of Willow's gait, enjoying the spectacular mountain scenery. Have you lived in the West long? She asked Wyatt as they rode side by side along a wide section of trail. Since I was 12, he replied. My father brought us out from Missouri after the war, said a man could breathe out here, make something of himself without the weight of the past pressing down. Was he right? Wyatt considered this. For him, yes, he built something from nothing, a legacy that meant something. When he died 6 years ago, he was at peace with what he'd accomplished. And for you, Madeline pressed gently. Wyatt was silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I'm still figuring that part out," he finally answered. "The ranch keeps me busy, but sometimes I wonder if there's more." The honesty of his response touched Madeline. It was rare for a man to admit such vulnerability. "I think we're all figuring it out as we go," she offered. "My mother used to say life isn't about reaching a destination, but about how you travel the path." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Madeline said softly. "I miss her wisdom every day." They rode in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The trail narrowed as it wound through a dense stand of pines, forcing them to ride single file. Madeline found herself studying Wyatt's straight back, the confident way he sat in the saddle, the careful attention he paid to their surroundings. By midday, they reached a small clearing beside a bubbling stream, a perfect spot to rest the horses and eat some of Mrs. Peterson's provisions. Wyatt helped Madeline dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The brief contact sent that now familiar flutter through her stomach, which she firmly ignored. They sat on a fallen log while the horses drank from the stream. Sharing Mrs. Peterson's food, they talked easily about books they had read, places they had seen, and their hopes for the future. Madeline was surprised by how well-read Wyatt was, despite his frontier upbringing. "My mother insisted on education," he explained when she commented on his knowledge of Shakespeare. "She taught all three of us children herself until a proper school was established in Silver Ridge. Said just because we lived in the wilderness didn't mean our minds had to be wild too." "She sounds remarkable," Madeline said, impressed. "She was. Father built the ranch, but Mother built us." His expression softened with the memory. "She'd have liked you. She always valued people who knew their own minds." The compliment warmed Madeline more than it should have. "And your sisters, you mentioned they moved to California," Margaret and Elizabeth, both married well to brothers who own a shipping business in San Francisco. Pride colored his voice. "They write regularly. Margaret has 2 children now, and Elizabeth is expecting her first. You must miss them." "Every day," he admitted, "but they're happy, and that matters more than having them near." The simple statement revealed much about Wyatt's character, his willingness to put others' happiness before his own desires. It was a rare quality in Madeline's experience, especially among men. As they continued their journey that afternoon, Madeline found herself sharing more of her own story, her dreams of someday opening her own school, her love of literature, and her determination to create a life that wasn't dependent on marriage to a suitable man, as her aunt had constantly urged. "My aunt never understood why I wouldn't simply marry her friend's son and settle down properly," Madeline explained as they navigated a steep section of trail. "She couldn't comprehend that I wanted more than just security and social standing." "What did you want?" Wyatt asked, genuine interest in his voice. Madeline considered the question carefully. "Purpose, independence, and if I ever did marry, I wanted it to be for love, real love, not convenience or expectation." "And have you found that, love?" His question was casual, but something in his tone made Madeline glance sharply at him. "No," she answered honestly. "I've had suitors, but none that made me feel." She trailed off, unsure how to explain something she herself didn't fully understand. "Made you feel what?" Wyatt prompted gently. "Like I couldn't breathe properly when they entered a room," she finally said, surprising herself with the admission. Like everything before them was in black and white, and suddenly the world was in color. Their eyes met briefly before Madeline looked away, flustered by her own uncharacteristic openness. "That's worth waiting for," Wyatt said softly, and something in his voice made her wonder if he was speaking from experience, perhaps about the woman who had jilted him. They made camp that evening in a sheltered grove, the distant peaks silhouetted against the fading light. Wyatt efficiently built a small fire and prepared a simple meal supplemented by Mrs. Peterson's provisions. Madeline marveled at his competence in the wilderness, how he seemed to anticipate needs before they arose, from securing the horses to ensuring she had the most comfortable spot by the fire. As darkness fell, they sat close to the flames, the mountain night growing cold around them. Wyatt produced a small flask from his saddlebag. Whiskey, he explained, offering it to her. Just a sip helps keep the chill away. Madeline hesitated, then accepted the flask. The liquor burned her throat but spread warmth through her body. She handed it back, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Tell me about Denver," Wyatt said, taking his own drink before stowing the flask. "What do you expect to find there?" "A fresh start," she replied, drawing her knees up and wrapping her arms around them. The school is newly built, part of the city's efforts to establish itself as more than just a mining hub. Uncle Thomas says Denver is growing rapidly, becoming more civilized every year. "It is," Wyatt agreed. "I go there a few times a year to sell cattle and purchase supplies." It's changing fast, electric streetlights in some areas now, fancy restaurants, even an opera house. "Have you been to the opera?" Madeline asked, trying to picture this rugged cowboy in such refined surroundings. To her surprise, he nodded. "Once. My mother loved music, so when I heard they were performing La Traviata, I went in her memory." He stared into the fire. "I wore my one good suit and felt like everyone could tell I didn't belong, but when the music started..." He shook his head slightly. "It was like she was there with me." The simple confession touched Madeline deeply. "That's beautiful, Wyatt." He looked up, seemingly embarrassed by his own sentimentality. "Not the sort of story most cowboys would share around a campfire." "I'm not most cowboys," Madeline replied with a smile, "so I think it's safe." His answering smile made the firelight seem brighter somehow. They talked long into the night, sharing stories and dreams until Madeline could barely keep her eyes open. "You should get some rest," Wyatt finally said, noticing her stifled yawn. "I've laid out your bedroll over there, away from the dampness." Madeline wanted to protest that she wasn't tired, that she wanted to continue their conversation, but exhaustion was overtaking her. She moved to her bedroll, wrapping herself in the blanket Wyatt had provided. "Where will you sleep?" she asked, suddenly aware that there was only one bedroll besides her own. "I'll keep watch for a while," he said, adding wood to the fire. "Don't worry about me, I'm used to sleeping under the stars." As Madeline drifted toward sleep, she heard him begin to hum softly an old folk tune her father used to sing. The gentle sound followed her into dreams where bridges collapsed and strong arms caught her, again and again. She woke at dawn to find Wyatt already up, coffee brewing over a small morning fire. He handed her a steaming cup with a smile that seemed to chase away the mountain chill. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Better than I expected," she admitted, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm cup. "Though I'm not accustomed to such hard ground, you'll toughen up," he said with a grin. "By the time we reach Denver, you'll be a proper frontierswoman." "I doubt 3 days is sufficient for such a transformation," she replied dryly, but returned his smile. They ate a quick breakfast and broke camp efficiently, back on the trail as the sun crested the eastern mountains. The second day's journey took them through increasingly varied terrain across high meadows dotted with wildflowers, through aspen groves where the leaves shimmered like golden coins in the breeze, and along narrow paths that hugged mountainsides, offering breathtaking views of valleys below. Madeline found herself growing more comfortable in the saddle and more comfortable with Wyatt. Their conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences when words seemed unnecessary. She learned about his cattle operation, his plans to expand into horse breeding, and his quiet pride in the legacy his father had built. In turn, she shared more about her teaching philosophy, her favorite books, and her hopes for her future students in Denver. Wyatt listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest in her passions. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds began gathering on the horizon. Wyatt studied the sky with concern. "Storm's coming," he said. "We should find shelter before it hits." "Is there a town nearby?" Madeline asked, eyeing the threatening clouds. Wyatt shook his head. "Nothing for miles, but there's an old line shack about an hour ahead if we push the horses. Belongs to the Barton Ranch, but they won't mind us using it in bad weather." They urged the horses to a faster pace, racing against the approaching storm. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Madeline felt the first heavy drops just as a small cabin came into view, nestled against a hillside and partially hidden by pines. They reached the shack moments before the skies opened. Wyatt helped Madeline dismount and quickly led the horses to a lean-to at the side of the cabin while she hurried inside. The lined shack was primitive but solid, a single room with a stone fireplace, rough wooden table and chairs, and a narrow cot against one wall. Dust covered every surface, but the roof appeared intact and a stack of firewood waited beside the hearth. Wyatt entered, shaking water from his hat. "Not exactly the Silvertip Hotel," he said apologetically, "but it'll keep us dry." "It's perfect," Madeline assured him, already gathering kindling for a fire as rain hammered against the roof. Working together, they soon had a cheerful blaze going. Wyatt retrieved their saddlebags from the horses and hung their damp outer garments near the fire to dry. The storm intensified outside, lightning flashing through the cabin's single window and thunder cracking overhead. "Looks like we'll be here a while," Wyatt observed, unpacking some of their remaining provisions. "These mountain storms can last hours." Madeline tried to ignore the intimacy of their situation alone in a tiny cabin, miles from civilization, with night approaching and a storm raging outside. It was exactly the kind of scenario her aunt would have declared thoroughly improper, which made Madeline smile despite herself. "Something amusing?" Wyatt asked, catching her expression. "I was just thinking what my Aunt Harriet would say about this situation. She'd be utterly scandalized." Wyatt's eyebrows rose. "Because you're unchaperoned with a man you barely know." "Precisely." Madeline arranged the food on the table. "She believes a woman's reputation is her most valuable possession, to be guarded more carefully than gold. And what do you believe?" Wyatt asked, his voice quiet beneath the drumming rain. Madeline considered the question. "I believe a woman's mind and character are her most valuable possessions. Reputation matters, of course, but it shouldn't be based on appearances and arbitrary rules of propriety." "That's a progressive view for a schoolteacher," Wyatt observed, no judgment in his tone. "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "But I judge people by their actions and integrity, not by whether they follow every societal convention, don't you?" "I try to," he said, setting 2 tin cups on the table and filling them with coffee from his canteen. "Though out here, conventions are already looser than back east. One of the things I find appealing about the West," Madeline admitted. "There seems to be more room to breathe, to define oneself beyond traditional expectations." "Is that why you're coming west? To escape expectations?" "Partly," she acknowledged, "but also to build something meaningful, to make a difference in children's lives." She paused, studying him across the small table. "What about you? Have you ever wanted to leave Silver Ridge, start fresh somewhere else?" A shadow crossed his face. "Once, after Sarah," he stopped abruptly. "Mrs. Peterson mentioned her," Madeline said gently. "I'm sorry if it's painful to discuss," Wyatt sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It was 3 years ago, ancient history now." He stared into the fire. "Sarah and I grew up together in Silver Ridge. Everyone expected us to marry. I expected it too, had the ring and everything. Then a banker from Denver came to town, looking to invest in what was left of the mining operations." His jaw tightened slightly. 3 weeks later, she was gone, left me a note saying she couldn't imagine spending her life in a dying town when Denver offered so much more." "That must have been devastating," Madeline said softly. "It was," he admitted. "Not just losing her, but realizing our entire relationship had been built on assumptions and expectations rather than real understanding. She never shared my love for the ranch, for the land. I just never noticed because I never really asked. And after she left, you thought about leaving too," he nodded. "Considered selling everything, heading to California to join my sisters, but the ranch has been in my family for 2 generations. Leaving felt like betraying my father's memory, my own heritage. So you stayed." "I stayed," he confirmed, "and gradually realized it was the right choice, not just out of obligation, but because it's truly where I belong." He met her eyes across the table. "Sometimes the hardest part is figuring out what we want versus what we think we should want." The words resonated with Madeline in unexpected ways. Had she chosen teaching because it was truly her passion, or because it was one of the few respectable careers available to a woman of her background? Was Denver her destination because she genuinely wanted to be there, or because it represented escape from her aunt's house? The questions unsettled her, especially as she realized how comfortable she felt in this rough cabin with Wyatt, how natural their conversations had become, how she'd shared thoughts with him she'd never voiced to anyone else. "You've gone quiet," Wyatt observed. "Just thinking about what you said," she admitted. "About knowing what we truly want." Thunder boomed overhead, making her start slightly. Wyatt smiled reassuringly. "Storm's moving closer. Going to be a long night, I think." They ate a simple meal by firelight as rain continued to pound the roof. Afterward, Wyatt insisted Madeline take the narrow cot while he would make do with his bedroll on the floor. "I can't take your bed," she protested. "You've done enough for me already." "It's not my bed," he pointed out reasonably, "and I've slept on harder floors than this one." Too tired to argue further, Madeline finally agreed. She settled onto the cot while Wyatt spread his bedroll near the fire, a respectful distance away. As she drifted towards sleep, lulled by the rain and the crackling fire, Madeline found herself acutely aware of Wyatt's presence across the room. In just 3 days, this man had shifted from stranger to rescuer to what? Friend seemed insufficient for the connection she felt forming between them, yet anything more was surely impossible given the circumstances. Denver waited at the end of their journey. Her new life, her carefully laid plans. Yet for the first time, Madeline found herself reluctant to reach their destination. Morning brought clearing skies and birdsong. Madeline woke to find the cabin empty, a small fire still burning in the hearth. She stepped outside to discover Wyatt tending to the horses, his back to her as he brushed Copper's gleaming coat. The world seemed washed clean by the storm, colors more vibrant in the morning light. Mountains rose majestically against a clear blue sky, and wildflowers dotted the meadow below the cabin. "It's beautiful," she said, drawing Wyatt's attention. He turned, a smile lighting his face at the sight of her. "Good morning. Sleep well." "Better than I expected," she replied, moving to stroke Willow's soft nose. "How much farther to Denver? With good weather, we should reach the outskirts by nightfall," he said, returning to his grooming. "We'll stay at a proper hotel tonight, and tomorrow morning I'll take you to your uncle's address." Tomorrow, their journey would end tomorrow. Madeline felt an unexpected pang at the thought. "Wyatt," she began, then hesitated, unsure what she wanted to say. He looked up, waiting. "Thank you," she finally said. "Not just for saving my life at the bridge, but for everything since. Your kindness has been extraordinary." Something flickered in his eyes, a brief vulnerability quickly masked. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly, "they wouldn't have. What you've done goes far beyond common decency, and I want you to know I appreciate it." He nodded once, seeming uncomfortable with her gratitude. "We should get moving if we want to reach Denver by dark." They ate a quick breakfast, packed their few belongings, and were soon back on the trail. The day warmed quickly, the sun drying the mud from yesterday's storm. They rode through increasingly populated areas as they neared the city, passing small homesteads and eventually larger farms. Their conversation was more sporadic than on previous days, as if both were lost in their own thoughts about the journey's end. By late afternoon, they could see Denver in the distance, a sprawling settlement nestled against the backdrop of mountains. "It's bigger than I imagined," Madeline said as they paused to rest the horses on a rise overlooking the city. "It grows every year," Wyatt replied. "When I first saw it as a boy, it was little more than a mining camp. Now look at it. Buildings of stone and brick lined organized streets. Church spires and government offices rose above surrounding structures, and smoke from countless chimneys hung in the air. In the distance, the newly constructed Union Station stood as a symbol of Denver's connection to the wider world. "Are you excited?" Wyatt asked, studying her face. "Yes," Madeline said, though the word lacked conviction even to her own ears. "It's just bigger than Silver Ridge," Wyatt chuckled. "Most places are. You'll adjust quickly, I'm sure." They continued toward the city, joining a steady stream of wagons, riders, and pedestrians as they neared the outskirts. Madeline felt increasingly out of place in her practical riding clothes as they passed women in fashionable urban attire. She smoothed her hair self-consciously, aware of how travel-worn she must appear. Wyatt led them to a modest but respectable hotel on a busy street lined with shops and businesses. After securing rooms for them, both separated by a proper distance down the hallway, he arranged for a hot bath to be sent to Madeline's room. "I have some business to attend to," he explained as they parted in the hotel lobby. "Will you be comfortable dining alone, or shall I return to escort you to supper?" Madeline wanted to ask him to return, to extend their time together for just a few hours more, but her pride prevented it. "I'll be fine on my own, thank you. You've done more than enough already." Was it disappointment she saw flash across his face? Before she could be certain, he nodded politely. "Very well. I'll meet you in the lobby at 9 tomorrow morning to take you to your uncle's home." "Thank you," she said, suddenly formal with him in a way she hadn't been during their journey. "Until tomorrow, then." In her room, Madeline sank gratefully into the hot bath, washing away the dust of travel. As she soaked, she tried to recapture her excitement about the teaching position, about beginning her new life in Denver. Instead, her thoughts kept returning to Wyatt, his smile, his quiet strength, the way he listened when she spoke as if her words truly mattered. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself, rising from the cooling water. "You've known the man for 4 days, 4 days. People don't fall in love in 4 days." The word love startled her as it left her lips. Surely that wasn't what she was feeling. Gratitude, yes, attraction, certainly. But love required time, understanding, shared experiences, like surviving a bridge collapse together. Like 3 days of conversation that had revealed more about each other than many couples learned in years of courtship. Like the feeling of absolute safety and rightness she felt in his presence. Madeline dressed in her cleanest remaining clothes and ventured downstairs to the hotel dining room. She ate mechanically, barely tasting the food, her mind whirling with conflicted thoughts. By the time she returned to her room, she had convinced herself that her feelings were merely the natural result of an intense, shared experience. They would fade once she was established in her new life. She opened her journal, intending to record the day's journey, but found herself writing about Wyatt instead: his kindness, his intelligence, the respect with which he treated her opinions and dreams. When she finally set down her pen, she had filled pages, yet felt no closer to understanding her own heart. Morning came too quickly. Madeline dressed with care in the clothes Mrs. Peterson had helped her select, wanting to make a good impression on her uncle. At precisely 9, she descended to the lobby to find Wyatt waiting, dressed in what was clearly his best shirt and jacket, his hat in his hands. "Good morning," he greeted her, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. "You look rested." "As do you," she replied, noticing how the clean shirt brought out the blue of his eyes. "Is it far to my uncle's home?" "Not very. We can take a hired carriage." The ride through Denver's streets gave Madeline her first real look at the city that would be her new home. It was indeed growing rapidly, construction visible on many corners, people of all descriptions hurrying about their business, the sounds and smells of commerce filling the air. They pulled up before a handsome brick house on a tree-lined street. Madeline felt a flutter of nervousness as she descended from the carriage, Wyatt's steady hand helping her down. "Would you like me to accompany you to the door?" he asked. She wanted to say yes, to keep him by her side just a little longer, but she shook her head. "I should do this alone, I think." "But thank you for everything, Wyatt, truly." He nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "It was my pleasure, Madeline. I wish you every happiness in your new position." She extended her hand formally, as if they were mere acquaintances parting after a casual meeting. He took it gently, but instead of shaking it, he raised it to his lips in a gesture that belonged to another time, another world. "Goodbye, Miss Everhart," he said softly. "Goodbye, Mr. O'Connor," she replied, her voice barely steady. He released her hand and stepped back toward the waiting carriage. Madeline turned quickly, not trusting herself to watch him leave, and walked up the path to her uncle's front door. She knocked, smoothing her skirt nervously as she waited. The door opened to reveal a distinguished-looking man with graying hair and kind eyes that immediately reminded her of her mother. "Uncle Thomas," she said with genuine pleasure. "Madeline," he exclaimed, joy and relief washing over his features. "My dear girl, I was so worried when I received that telegram about the bridge collapse." Come in at once," he ushered her inside, calling for his housekeeper to bring tea. The house was elegantly appointed, speaking of comfort and prosperity. Madeline found herself seated in a well-furnished parlor as her uncle studied her with concern. "You look well, considering your ordeal," he said. "When I heard what happened, I feared the worst. The telegram mentioned a Mr. O'Connor who came to your rescue." "Yes," Madeline confirmed, her heart beating faster at the mere mention of Wyatt's name. "He saved my life when the bridge collapsed, then escorted me safely to Denver when I lost all my belongings in the accident." "I must thank him properly," Uncle Thomas declared. "Where is he staying?" "I shall call on him immediately." Madeline realized with a jolt that she didn't know. In all their conversations, Wyatt had never mentioned where he stayed when in Denver. "I'm not certain," she admitted. "He has business in the city, but I believe he'll return to his ranch near Silver Ridge soon." "Silver Ridge, that mining town that's nearly a ghost town now?" Her uncle frowned slightly. "What business could he have there?" "He owns a cattle ranch nearby," Madeline explained. "It's been in his family for generations." "I see," Uncle Thomas said, though his tone suggested he didn't entirely approve. "Well, the important thing is that you're here safely. The school board is eager to meet you. I've arranged an introduction for tomorrow morning. And Mrs. Hathaway next door is hosting a small gathering tomorrow evening where you can meet some of Denver's finest families." As her uncle continued outlining the busy schedule he'd arranged for her, Madeline tried to focus on the opportunities ahead. This was what she had wanted, after all, a position of respect, independence, a chance to make a difference. Yet as she sipped her tea in the comfortable parlor, she couldn't help wondering what Wyatt was doing at that moment, whether he was already preparing to leave Denver behind. The next several days passed in a whirlwind of introductions and orientations. The school board members were impressed with Madeline's credentials and teaching philosophy. The school itself was a handsome new building with large windows and modern equipment far superior to the small rural schoolhouse where she had taught in Pennsylvania. She met her future colleagues, all of whom seemed competent and welcoming, if a bit more formal than she was accustomed to. Several of the board members had daughters Madeline's age who invited her to social gatherings, and Uncle Thomas ensured she was included in the city's better circles. By all measures, her new life was unfolding perfectly. Yet each night as she wrote in her journal, her thoughts inevitably turned to Wyatt. Had he already returned to Silver Ridge? Would she ever see him again? The questions haunted her, making it difficult to fully embrace the opportunity before her. A week after her arrival in Denver, Madeline was helping her uncle's housekeeper prepare for a small dinner party when a knock came at the front door. She heard murmured voices in the entryway, then her uncle calling her name. "Madeline, my dear, you have a visitor." She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped into the hallway, freezing at the sight of the tall figure standing beside her uncle. "Mr. O'Connor," she breathed, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. Wyatt stood with his hat in his hands, looking slightly uncomfortable in the formal surroundings but undeniably handsome in a well-cut suit she hadn't seen before. "Miss Everhart," he greeted her with a slight bow. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," she assured him, suddenly conscious of her flower-dusted apron and loosened hair. "I was just helping with preparations for tonight's dinner." "I'll leave you two to catch up," Uncle Thomas said, a speculative gleam in his eye as he looked between them. "Mr. O'Connor, you're welcome to join us for dinner this evening if you have no other engagements." "That's very kind, sir," Wyatt replied, "but I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense. Any man who saved my niece's life is always welcome at my table." With that, Uncle Thomas disappeared down the hallway, leaving them alone. "You look well," Wyatt said after a moment of charged silence. "Denver seems to agree with you." Thank you, Madeline replied, removing her apron and smoothing her hair self-consciously. Would you like to sit in the parlor? Or perhaps the garden, it's quite pleasant this time of day. The garden, if you don't mind, Wyatt said. I've been in enough parlors this week to last a lifetime. His comments sparked her curiosity as she led him through the house to the small but well-tended garden at the rear. They sat on a wrought iron bench beneath a flowering apple tree, a respectful distance between them. Business going well? She asked. Better than expected, he replied cryptically. How are you finding the school? Everything you hoped for? It's impressive, she said truthfully. Well equipped with dedicated teachers and eager students, classes begin next week and I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad, he said, and she believed he meant it. You'll make an excellent teacher, Madeline. Those children are fortunate to have you. Thank you. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind. When do you return to Silver Ridge? Wyatt studied the garden, his expression thoughtful. That depends. On what? He turned to face her directly, his blue eyes intense. On whether there might be a reason for me to stay in Denver longer. Madeline's heart began to race. What sort of reason? Instead of answering immediately, Wyatt reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. I found this, he said, offering it to her. It washed up downstream from where the bridge collapsed. With trembling fingers, Madeline unwrapped the package to reveal a silver locket, her mother's locket that she had carried in her carpet bag, the one possession besides her diary that had truly mattered to her. How did you? She began, tears filling her eyes. I went back, he explained simply. The day after I left you here, I searched the creek banks for several miles, found it caught in some driftwood. Madeline opened the locket with reverent fingers, revealing the tiny portraits of her parents inside, perfectly preserved despite their immersion. Wyatt, she whispered, unable to find adequate words, I can't believe you did this. I know how much family means to you, he said quietly. And I wanted an excuse to see you again. Their eyes met, and Madeline felt that now familiar flutter intensify. You didn't need an excuse. A smile touched his lips. Propriety suggested otherwise. You're establishing yourself as a respectable schoolteacher. I didn't want to complicate that. And now, she asked, hardly daring to breathe. Now I'm hoping you might allow me to call on you properly, he said. With your uncle's permission, of course. Joy bubbled up inside her, but caution tempered it. Wyatt, I'm confused. You live in Silver Ridge. I'm here in Denver. How could this possibly work? That's part of what I wanted to tell you, he said, his expression brightening. Remember I mentioned expanding into horse breeding? She nodded. The business I've been conducting this week, I've purchased land outside Denver. 30 acres with good water access and existing stables. I'm establishing a second operation here, breeding and training horses for the Denver market. Madeline stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You're moving to Denver? Not entirely, he clarified. I'll still maintain the cattle ranch in Silver Ridge. I have good men who can manage it with regular supervision. But I'll be spending at least half my time here in Denver developing the horse business. Since when have you been planning this? She asked, trying to make sense of this unexpected development. Wyatt looked slightly sheepish. I've been considering it for nearly a year. The opportunity to purchase the right property just happened to arise this week. So it's not because of... She couldn't finish the sentence. You. He supplied gently. No, Madeline, I wouldn't uproot my entire life on a whim, even for a woman as remarkable as you. His expression softened. But I will admit that meeting you gave me the final push I needed to make the decision. Relief flooded through her. She didn't want to be responsible for changing the course of his life, nor did she want a man who would abandon his dreams and responsibilities for a chance at romance. In that case, she said, a smile blooming on her face, I would be very pleased if you called on me, Mr. O'Connor. His answering smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. I was hoping you'd say that, Miss Everhart. Dinner that evening was a revelation. Watching Wyatt converse easily with her uncle and his guests, a judge, a newspaper editor, and their wives, Madeline saw yet another side of this complex man. He was knowledgeable about business and politics, respectful without being deferential, and possessed a dry wit that had the entire table laughing more than once. When the conversation turned to education, he spoke eloquently about its importance on the frontier, crediting his mother's determination for his own love of learning. The school board president, who was among the guests, was visibly impressed. "You're full of surprises, Mr. O'Connor," Madeline murmured as they took coffee in the parlor afterward. "As are you, Miss Everhart," he replied. "I had no idea you were such an accomplished pianist." She blushed, recalling her uncle's insistence that she play for the guests after dinner. "My mother insisted on lessons from childhood. Music and literature were her passions." "She would be proud of you," he said softly, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Later, as he prepared to leave, Wyatt asked permission to call again the following afternoon. Uncle Thomas granted it readily, a knowing twinkle in his eye as he observed the pair. "Until tomorrow, then," Wyatt said, bowing over Madeline's hand in that courtly manner that seemed both anachronistic and perfectly suited to him. "Until tomorrow," she echoed, already counting the hours. In the weeks that followed, Wyatt called regularly. They attended concerts at the new Opera House, rode through the city parks, and visited his newly acquired property where plans for expanded stables were already underway. Madeline began teaching at the school and quickly grew to love her students, finding the work as rewarding as she had hoped. Uncle Thomas observed their growing attachment with approval, especially after making discreet inquiries about Wyatt's character and business prospects. What he learned only confirmed his initial positive impression. Wyatt O'Connor was widely respected for his integrity and business acumen, and his new venture in Denver was already attracting attention from serious horse buyers. As autumn deepened toward winter, Wyatt invited Madeline to accompany him on a visit to Silver Ridge. "I need to check on the ranch," he explained, "and I'd like you to see where I grew up, meet Mrs. Peterson again under less dramatic circumstances." "I'd love that," Madeline said sincerely. "Though I'm not sure if it's proper for me to travel alone with you, even now." "Your uncle and I have already discussed it," Wyatt assured her. "Mrs. Peterson will chaperone you during your stay and will travel by stagecoach rather than horseback this time." The return to Silver Ridge was like stepping into a familiar dream. The mountains welcomed her, the crisp air and vast skies a refreshing change from Denver's growing urban landscape. Mrs. Peterson greeted her like a long-lost daughter, and the townsfolk treated her with warmth as the schoolteacher Wyatt rescued from the bridge. The O'Connor Ranch exceeded her expectations, a sprawling property with a handsome main house built of local stone and timber, surrounded by well-maintained outbuildings and corrals filled with healthy cattle. Wyatt showed her around with evident pride, introducing her to the loyal cowboys who kept the operation running smoothly in his increasingly frequent absences. "It's magnificent," Madeline told him as they stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "I understand now why you could never fully leave this place. It's in my blood," he acknowledged, "but I'm finding that Denver has its attractions too." The way he looked at her left no doubt about what, or rather who, those attractions included. On their final evening in Silver Ridge, Wyatt took Madeline to the spot where Serpent Creek flowed past his property, a peaceful stretch far downstream from where the bridge had collapsed. "I used to come here as a boy when I needed to think," he explained as they walked along the bank. "Something about moving water helps clear the mind." Madeline understood exactly what he meant. The gentle sound of the creek, so different from its raging torrent during the storm, had a meditative quality. They stopped at a flat rock overlooking a small pool where trout occasionally broke the surface. The setting sun cast long shadows through the pines, and a cool breeze carried the scent of evergreen and distant snow. "Madeline," Wyatt said, turning to face her fully, "these past weeks have been the happiest of my life." Her heart began to race at the serious tone in his voice. "Mine too," she admitted softly. "When that bridge collapsed and I saw you falling, something inside me changed," he continued, taking her hands in his. "It was as if everything that mattered suddenly became crystal clear." "What did you see?" she asked, hardly daring to breathe, a future I hadn't allowed myself to imagine since Sarah left. His blue eyes held her steadily. A future I now can't imagine without you in it. With deliberate movements, Wyatt knelt before her on the rocky bank, still holding her hands. Madeline Everhart, I know it hasn't been long in the traditional sense, but I believe some people recognize their hearts match instantly. I knew from the moment you reached for my hand on that collapsing bridge that you were the woman I'd been waiting for my whole life. Tears filled Madeline's eyes as he continued. I love your courage, your intelligence, your compassion. I love how you see the world and your place in it. I love that you have dreams of your own and the determination to pursue them. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. I'm asking if you might consider adding one more dream to your collection, a life shared with me as my wife. He opened the box to reveal a beautiful ring, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds in an antique gold setting. It was my grandmother's, he explained. My mother always said it should go to the woman who captured my heart completely. Madeline stared at the ring, then at the man kneeling before her, this remarkable man who had literally caught her when she was falling, who had shown her kindness without expectation, who had respected her independence while offering his heart. Wyatt, she whispered, her voice catching. Are you certain? We've known each other such a short time. I've never been more certain of anything, he said simply. But if you need more time, I understand. I'll wait as long as you need. In that moment, Madeline realized she didn't need more time. The certainty in her heart matched his own, a recognition that some connections transcended conventional timelines, that some hearts recognized their match instantly. Yes, she said, joy bubbling up and overflowing in tears and laughter. Yes, Wyatt O'Connor, I will marry you. His face transformed with happiness as he rose to his feet, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her all along. When he gathered her into his arms and kissed her, Madeline felt as though her life had come full circle from the moment of terrifying freefall, when the bridge collapsed, to this perfect instant of absolute certainty. They were married the following spring in Denver, with Uncle Thomas giving away the bride and Mrs. Peterson dabbing tears throughout the ceremony. Madeline completed the school year as promised, then divided her time between helping Wyatt establish his horse breeding operation and working with a charity to establish schools in smaller settlements around Denver. 2 years later, they welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Eleanor after Madeline's mother. A son, Thomas, followed 18 months later. The children grew up with 2 homes, the ranch near Silver Ridge, where they spent summers riding horses and exploring the mountains, and the house outside Denver, where they attended school and enjoyed the growing city's cultural offerings. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Wyatt surprised Madeline with a special gift, a bridge. Not a large one, but a sturdy, elegant footbridge spanning a small stream on their Denver property, connecting the main house to a newly built schoolhouse where Madeline now taught the children of neighboring ranchers and their own growing family. So I never have to worry about you crossing unstable bridges again, he explained as he carried her across it for the first time, much as he had done when he rescued her from the collapsing bridge years before. My hero, she teased, though the sentiment behind the words was entirely genuine. Always, he promised, setting her gently on her feet, though I suspect you could have saved yourself given the chance. Perhaps, she acknowledged with a smile, but I'm rather glad I didn't have to. Standing on the solid bridge he had built for her, surrounded by the life they had created together, Madeline marveled at how a moment of disaster had led to her greatest happiness. The bridge that had collapsed beneath her feet had, in its way, built a path to everything she had ever truly wanted: purpose, family, and a love that had recognized its match in an instant of perfect clarity. As Wyatt's arms encircled her, Madeline whispered the words she had said countless times since that day by Serpent Creek, yet which never lost their meaning or truth. I love you, Wyatt O'Connor. And I love you, Madeline O'Connor, he replied, his voice still holding the same wonder it had the first time he said those words. more with each passing day. The bridge beneath their feet stood strong and sure, a fitting symbol for the love that had carried them from a moment of peril to a lifetime of joy.